Welcome. What you're about to watch is a video on which iPad to purchase if you want to run a YouTube channel from an iPad. This is based on my couple years experience doing this. We're running a channel that earns between $1,000 and $2,000. This is part of a course which you can now get on SkillShare, or you can get it if you become a member. You can find all the links below. Enjoy. In this video, we're going to talk about what iPad you should purchase. The truth is, if you have an iPad that is still getting software updates, you actually already have a device that is going to be fast enough to get you started. So there's no need to purchase one if you have a relatively modern iPad, something that's still getting software updates. You're good to go. But there are some considerations to make just to make your job easier, to make your life easier when you're looking at an iPad to do video production work on. First off is screen size. Now, a bigger screen is just going to be better for you. The 12.9-inch iPad Pro is my iPad of choice because it has the biggest screen. It's the most versatile when I want to go edit video, say out on my deck or in some other place of the house because I have to watch kids at the same time as finishing up a video. Realistically, the iPad mini can do it. It can work and it can be a decent video editing machine because it's fast enough, but the screen is going to feel a little cramped. Now, there are some updates with iPadOS 16, which you can actually see in behind me where I have my iPad and then I have a monitor with my iPad screen as a secondary display. That alone actually kind of leads you towards, say, an M1 iPad Pro with USB-C, because then it can produce a second screen for you and give you a lot more screen real estate if you have a second screen around. So even then, an iPad Air with the M1 processor in it will give you a second screen, and it gives you a lot more screen real estate without bumping all the way up to the iPad Pro. Now, on processing power, I've already kind of mentioned that any iPad that is still getting software updates will work. I have done some test renders recently on my daughter's 9.7-inch iPad, just plain Jane iPad. I think it's like got the A13 in it or A14. It's an older processor. It is still excellent. There is a minimal lag in any editing. There is really, it's just rendering. You're going to wait an extra 20 seconds for renders. It's not that big a deal. Now, if you're rendering in multi-hour videos, it's actually going to add up more. The longer the video is, the longer the rendering time is going to take, and the longer the difference between the faster devices and the slower devices, it makes more of a difference then. But ultimately, the biggest thing in processing power is looking at the M1 devices, simply because they will support Stage Manager and iPadOS 16 and give you the option to have more screen real estate once you've started making some money, once you start going and you've saved some more, and then maybe you can get an external monitor. Now, storage. If you're going to be running a YouTube channel, you're going to be generating a lot of video files. They're just big. I know recording with my iPhone 13 mini 4K video at 10 minutes is going to take about 3.5 gigabytes of storage. So if I'm going to record multiple videos or have multiple bits of B-roll with this, I may end up with like 50 or 60 gigs of footage just using my iPhone 13. Using my Canon 90D, which is what I'm looking at right now, I'll actually take up about a gig a minute of video. So if I'm doing a 26-minute video, I'll have 26 gigs of video. Then if I'm doing, other B-roll on top of that, it could easily end up being like 50 gigs of video. For a 10 or 15 minute YouTube video for what I use at the end. Overall, you may say that's not that much. If I get a 128 gig iPad Pro or an iPad, then I'll have plenty of storage, right? He's only talking about 50 gigs, that's fine. But what I've actually found is that you end up working on multiple projects at once. Often you'll have B-roll, for something future you're shooting. I often do that when I've done a headphone review. I'm out shooting with the headphone. I'm like, I'm going to review this bag at some point too. So I have video stored for that as well, because I was out shooting B-roll for like a couple products at once. When you get to that, then more than once I've actually realized, hey, wait, I'm at 500 gigs, or I even got close to a terabyte once on my iPad Pro behind me. And then I had to look at offloading my storage, offloading some projects to other places so that I still had the storage around. So I would suggest basically getting as much as you can afford. I think the minimum you can look at is 128 gigs if you are really watching your projects, making sure you don't keep around too many things too long. Even better really is 256. It's just going to give you double the breathing space over 128. So look at 256 kind of, I would say, as your lower end. Now, the other considerations, and I mentioned this a couple times, is USB-C. So you get USB-C on an iPad mini. And that will give you access to other docks, so Thunderbolt 4, other things like that, that lets you connect to wired internet, other things. So that doesn't mean, though, necessarily you get external monitor support. That is a good one for the M1 devices, but USB-C connector is going to open up a lot of possibilities and just usage of your iPad in general. So I'd highly suggest you get something with USB-C cable, just because of the options it opens up in connections for you. Now, as far as recommendations, kind of the smallest device I'd recommend is the 9.7-inch iPad for a YouTube channel. I actually used a 9.7-inch iPad Pro for the very beginning of this channel, and actually I used to code on it too. I use that as my main development machine for work, and I used it as my main video editing machine when I was just starting to get into the iPad Pro line, starting to get into the iPad as my main device. Now for $479 US, you can get 256 gigs of storage with this device. The biggest drawback to it is it's not USB-C. It doesn't have the M1 chip, so you're not going to get the extra screen real estate of iPad OS 16 with Stage Manager, and you're not going to get the extra connections you can really get from USB-C type devices. Apple has some that you can use with Lightning, but it's not as nice as USB-C. The next step up, and kind of the sweet spot I think for most people, is the iPad Air. For $749, you can get 256 gigs of storage. It comes with the M1 chip. It comes with the USB-C port. And it's just going to be best all around for your starting price point. I think it's very reasonable to start there if you're getting your first device, if you're going to save up for it and get your first device to really start producing video as well. It's going to be fast, it's going to have just enough storage, and it's going to have a good connection suite for everything you want, and it's going to support external monitors to make your editing process nicer. Next step up from there is $899 for the 11-inch iPad Pro. It has an M1 processor, has the USB 4 Thunderbolt ports, so basically the connection is faster. It's going to look exactly the same as USB-C port, but it's just faster, gives you some more capabilities. Really, that's the most expensive you need. The 11-inch iPad Pro at $899 US is really all you need. Comes with enough storage, it has the M1 processor, so it gives you external screen support, and it is fast. It's just as fast as the 12.9 behind me. So I wouldn't worry about much more than that, really. If you want to, you can of course get the iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch for $2,000 US with 2 terabytes of storage and maxed out, and that's great. But you don't need it. It might be nice to have, but you don't need it. I could certainly get by on an 11-inch iPad Pro, just as good as I can get by on this 12.9. As far as speeds go, as far as connectivity goes to external devices, that's all you really need.